You're watching Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerantz. We are joined today by Jerome Horton. He is the chair of California's Board of Equalization. And Chair, I want to speak with you about medical marijuana. Wow. It's a topic that continues to be in the news. We know the California Supreme Court is considering various pieces of municipal legislation, ordinances surrounding that. But let's not talk about that for now. That's to be continued. Sure. I want to talk to you about the taxing authority behind medical marijuana.
Right.
Are medical marijuana clinics supposed to collect taxes when they sell the product?
They are, Brad. And in fact, they're actually collecting and reporting millions of dollars in sales tax as well as the income taxes and so forth. It's the illegal operators that are not reporting and paying their fair share. And the unknown reality is that the Constitution provides that even the sale of illegal products is still subject to income tax.
Which is fascinating to me.
I know. If you remember the Prohibition times,
right.
At that time, Al Capone was supposed to report and pay the sales tax. That's why the tax man got him.
Exactly. He ultimately went to jail for failure to report income tax.
Yeah.
So today, the BOE is collecting at least sales tax. Based upon the sale of the marijuana. Income tax, the purveyors of the marijuana, they deal with that through their accountants or whatever it may be.
I mean, income taxes, they're subsidy income tax as well.
Regardless, it's their business.
Yeah.
It's their business.
Right.
Okay, but you are looking at whether all patients of medical marijuana should be subject to sales tax.
We're looking at it, Brad. We're looking at terminally ill patients, patients that are in hospice, those who have cancer, AIDS, that are terminally ill. The question is, should the pain and suffering of an individual who's dying, should we tax death? We know death and taxes kind of go hand in hand.
Right, they can, the estate tax, but aside from that, that's federal.
Should we be taxing someone to death? And we believe that we should not, and therefore we're pushing, advancing legislation to exempt the sale of medical marijuana or medicinal marijuana, exempt the sale by hospice, for hospice patients.
So are you sponsoring this? Is the entire BOE sponsoring it?
The entire Board of Equalization is sponsoring. The vote was 4-1. Okay. One of our members voted to not support the legislation. Okay. So now it's moving forward to the legislature. We have identified several authors, and we're looking to then advance it through the system and hopefully get it enacted so patients who are terminally ill will have a little bit of relief.
I understand.
And greater access.
And their families as well will have relief.
Yes.
And so how is it that under the legislation, if you know, will it be determined that someone is terminally ill? Is it once hospice arrives?
What therein is a challenge, Brad. So we actually supported the bill to say hospice. So once hospice arrives, once you've been identified as a hospice patient, at that point you receive an exemption and you're allowed to purchase your medicine exempt from taxes, or at least sales tax.
So what do you think?
I'm excited about it.
Right.
There's a $10 million price tag on it, but we believe the pain and suffering and the benefit to the patients far outweigh that. We also believe that estimate's a little bit high because the number of patients that will actually participate in the program is not as high as they expect.
I understand. Let's talk about our pets. Somehow it's so interesting. The BOE deals in such interesting areas in terms of taxing authority. And
who would have thought?
Who would have thought marijuana and pets? But we've seen countless commercials, both on television, on the internet, be it in print publications, where these companies are advertising for pet owners to purchase pet medicines via the internet per se.
Right.
And these are out-of-state companies.
Right.
What happens under that scenario?
When you purchase the medicine from an out-of-state company, California doesn't receive any taxes at all. So the out-of-state company is able to sell the product or the medicine at a lower price.
But let me back up for a second, because we know that there was a big piece of legislation that passed last year, the Amazon deal. It was kind of a big deal that Amazon finally agreed that they would put sales tax into their cart
Right.
for California residents.
They would pay their fair share and play by
right.
the rules, is the way we like to say it.
So why is it that an Amazon would be subject to sales tax, but PetMeds.net would not?
Because the out-of-state vendor doesn't have any nexus here in California. Amazon does. It has affiliates and it has buildings here in the state of California. So therefore they have nexus. They're required under the new law to collect and report this tax.
So if a company has no employees in California and is merely shipping product into the state, the U.S. Supreme Court has said that is not a taxable event.
Right. It's a violation of the Commerce Act. And so one state is not allowed to tax products that are moving in interstate commerce.
Exactly.
Now there is a use tax, so the consumer theoretically are supposed to report and pay the use tax, but most citizens don't know that.
Right, and we've learned, I spoke with Betty Yee, one of your colleagues, I've spoken with you, that the folks that have been paying their use tax, maybe about 0.5% of California.
Very small percentage.
It's not even so much that we're trying to dodge it,
right.
It's we don't know how to do it.
We don't know anything, don't even know it exists
exactly,
in many cases.
Exactly.
And the system isn't in place to actually report
Okay,
it.
so back to the pet medication situation. So you've you've uncovered that a lot of consumers in California are getting their pet medicines from out-of-state corporations. Right. You have some concerns.
But the other danger, Brad, is that when you buy your medicine from out of state, well, you may not have been directed on how to actually administer the medicine.
That's right.
So animals are dying as a result of improper use of the medicine. You're giving them too much, you're giving them too little, and so forth and so on.
And presumably they could be...
I mean, a lot of us see our pets as part of our family.
No doubt.
And many of us see them as human beings. And so we begin to treat them
They're
as
children,
human beings.
yes.
They're our children.
Right.
And so, but we can't treat them the same way. We can't give them a Bayer aspirin. And that will have a negative effect on their health. And so the goal of exempting...
Yeah, so let's here's the punchline.
Yeah, the goal is to exempt it from sales tax, to say that if you are a veterinarian and you go to a veterinarian who is administering the medicine or selling you the medicine along with the prescription and the description on how to administer, it's exempt from tax. It levels the playing field.
Oh, really?
Theoretically increases the number of sales here in California, so it's an economic stimulant as well.
Right.
And it also enhances the county, nonprofits, and other agencies that are treating our pets for free.
We're taxed if I get a prescription, not medical marijuana. Is there a sales tax on that?
If you get a prescription and it's administered by, it's distributed by a pharmacist, then no. If administered by a hospital, then no, there's no tax on medicine. So you might say this was equalizing
in some ways
the sale of medicine to humans and the sale of medicine to pets.
So, but why is medical marijuana then taxable?
Well, because it's not dispensed by a pharmacist.
Got it. Okay, we're mixing things up. Let's go back. Okay, so you're essentially saying, under the proposal, no sales tax on pet medications administered by a vet.
A vet, or the county, or a nonprofit,
whatever it may
anyone that's caring for a pet.
BOE supporting this entire board?
Entire board.
5-0.
5-0.
Okay, so where are we now?
Kathleen Galgiano is sponsoring the bill. She's carrying it forward. She's excited about it, and we believe we'll have enormous success with that as well.
So with both bills, it's nice not to have to pay sales tax.
Right.
We like that, but a potential $10 million impact on the medical marijuana hospice exemption. Do we know how much the pet med exemption would?
The pet med is like 1.5 million.
So it's pretty low.
It's pretty low.
But still, I mean, these exemptions all add up, and we know.
But when you offset the benefit.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. Right.
You offset the benefit of stimulating the economy, enhancing the health of our pets, and so forth. And then at the same time, part of the bill requires the vet to notify that you have to register your pet and license your pet. So that notification, we believe, will also generate revenue for the cities.
Okay, his name is Jerome Horton. He is chairman of the State Board of Equalization. Who knew taxes could be so interesting and innovative? My name is Brad Pomerantz. This is Charter California Edition. It's Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerantz. I'm glad you're with us today. We are joined by Ted Lieu. Ted is a member of the California State Senate. And sir, you have 2 children in public school and you represent lots of children as well. And so I want to talk to you about education funding. As we know, Proposition 30 passed in November. Right. Gives more funding to schools, K-12, K-14, UC-CSU. But the governor has proposed a new formula aside from Prop 30 that deals with local control and how funds can be spent. Why don't you talk to us about the local control funding formula?
Sure. I support more local control. I support streamlining the funding formula. But I believe we can do it in such a way where we don't create winners and losers. And
let's explain. What the governor is trying to do, pursuant to his proposal, is he would cut a lot of the strings between Sacramento and school districts. At the same time, though, he would provide certain bumps, financial bumps, for school districts that teach more English language learners,
correct,
foster kids, and schools that children that come from disadvantaged homes.
Right. And I don't have any philosophical problem with that, but the problem with the initial formula that was proposed is it takes some school districts and gives them less funding than they otherwise would have gotten if we just made no changes.
But I had thought that the governor's proposal was kind of a hold harmless, that we'll set a floor, right, no one's going to get cut from that floor, right, but if you have a certain number of kids in those categories, you'll get a 35% bump. If your entire district hits a 50% threshold of kids in those categories, you'll get another bump.
Right. That's what I was told,
okay,
and the problem is the floor is too low. So there are some districts, again, that actually get less funding than they otherwise would have gotten if we just made no changes. So I'll give you an example. Torrance Unified School District.
In your district?
In my district, Torrance is the 5th largest city in LA County, 83 languages spoken in that district. It will get $2.4 million less next year under the initial proposal than if we just made no changes to school funding formula. So at a minimum, we have to hold these districts harmless. They need to be given at least the same or slightly more under the new proposal than they otherwise would have gotten if we just made no changes.
But what about the whole notion that school districts should get more simply because they are teaching ESL students, foster kids, and kids from economically disadvantaged areas?
Well, I believe students should get more. But the way it's structured, for example, is one of their grants is this arbitrary grant where if your school district hits 50% English language learners, for example, you'll get a pretty significant bump in funding.
That's true.
But if you're a school district at 49%, you don't get that. So the English language learner student in that district will get less funding than someone in a neighboring district simply because of this arbitrary 50% cutoff.
And one could argue that with less strings attached, the school district's getting more money, but they don't necessarily have to spend that money.
They don't have to spend it on English language learners at all. They could spend it on upgrading their basketball program if they wanted to, for example.
And what about the notion that while there's no doubt that English language learners, kids from disadvantaged areas may need support, gifted students arguably need support. A bored gifted student is a troublemaker.
That is absolutely correct. And I think it's better, again, to look at funding in terms of per student rather than per district, because you'll have districts where they have very good schools and schools are not doing very well. But if that district doesn't hit a certain percentage, they don't get the supplemental funding. Now, and to your question, there is no supplemental funding, again, for gifted students at all.
And as I understand the proposal, it's 2 parts. There's a bump per student in the mentioned categories, but then it's that 50% threshold that could get you even an additional bump.
That is correct. And that, to me, in addition to having constitutional problems, because I don't see how it's equal in terms of funding students, but it strikes me as rather arbitrary to just set a 50% number.
So it's a proposal at this stage. And
it is.
So where do we stand?
So it'll go through both budget subcommittees and policy committees, and my hope is that the proposal gets altered so at least all districts rise. A system where you have winners and losers is not defensible. A system where you have all winners and some districts win some more, that's more defensible.
Do we have the funding to rise all boats?
We do. It would just mean the disparities would be less. So I'll give you an example. Under the current funding formula, Torrance Unified at the end of this implementation period will have about $3,000 less per student than a student at LAUSD. They're both in my district, but to me it's arbitrary to pick winners and losers that way.
Well,
because if you're a family living on one side of Western Avenue,
in Torrance as an example,
the state government under this formula believes your student is worth $12,000. If you're on the other side of Western Avenue, the state government believes your student is worth $9,000 something.
So you're part of the majority party. Yes. The governor is a Democrat. So are negotiations pending on this issue?
Yes, so people are looking at it, and I think many have realized that what was initially said is not quite true. It's not that all districts rise. Some actually get less funding than they otherwise would have gotten, and that's what we're trying to rectify, and I hope we can change it.
I want to speak with you also about an issue related to criminal justice. You've gotten a lot of print on your proposal dealing with creating new penalties for parolees that cut off GPS monitoring bracelets. We've spoken recently about it. Assemblymember Jim Patterson has proposed a similar bill in his House. He's a Republican. Where are we going on this issue? It does seem to be getting a lot of steam behind it.
Sure. So let me set some background information. Parolees out of state prison have been cutting off GPS devices for years. So it was a problem 3-4 years ago, as it is a problem now.
The suggestion is it's a bigger problem post-realignment.
It is, but it was also a problem before. So before realignment, about 1,800 or so parolees out of state prison were cutting off their GPS devices. Right now, it's about 2,200. And keep in mind, virtually all these parolees are sex offenders.
Why?
Because that's what the law requires under Jessica's law.
I understand.
Virtually all the parolees who have to wear GPS ankle bracelets are sex offenders. A small portion are hardcore gang members.
And what about counties using GPS as a device to decrease their overcrowding?
Right, so this is what is, I think, very important about this issue. I believe in GPS monitoring because it does reduce costs and it also reduces crime. But the system cannot work if people are cutting them off.
And so what you want to do, sir, is?
I want to increase penalties on people who cut off their GPS ankle bracelets. Under current law, it's not considered a crime if you cut off your ankle bracelet. It's merely viewed as a technical parole violation. You only go to county jail for up to 6 months. Many counties are overcrowded, so they don't even book you, or if they do, it's just for a few days. And that's not a deterrent that people view as very strong.
If it passes, arguably that would send more people to state prison, and we're still under pressure to keep our prison population down pursuant to U.S. Supreme Court order.
So I would dispute you.
Please, you're allowed, counselor.
What the studies show in terms of sex offenders is if you don't monitor them on GPS, their rate of recidivism increases 3 times, meaning they're 3 times more likely to go commit a new crime.
I see.
And eventually they're going to get caught and then land back in prison, probably for life or a very long time. So we actually will decrease prison overcrowding by making sure everyone wears the GPS ankle bracelets. And you have to have a strong enough hammer to make sure that happens.
So where do we stand on this issue? As I mentioned, Assemblyman Patterson has a bill running through his House. You have yours running through your House. Do we expect the bills to merge at some point?
So the Assembly will have their own committees.
Right.
My bill, Senate Bill 57, will be heard in Public Safety Committee in April. And this is an important problem because sex offenders don't commit sex crimes because, for example, they want to bring more food to the table or they don't have a college degree or anything else. It's very hard to rehabilitate a sex offender. That's why we put GPS ankle bracelets on them. And when they cut them off, it's not because they want to go bowling. It's because they want to go and
to the restricted areas
and have opportunities to commit more crimes.
Right. Okay, Ted Lieu, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Our guest has been Ted Lieu. He is a member of the California State Senate representing significant portions of Los Angeles County. My name is Brad Pomerantz. This is California Edition. This is Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerantz. I'm glad you're with us today, and I'm pleased to introduce you to Yvonne Horton. She is the elected city clerk in the city of Englewood. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. We appreciate it. Before we start to talk about some issues with regards to a pending election, tell us about the beautiful city of Englewood for those that don't know where it is. We are a statewide program, so give us a sense.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
Please.
Englewood is a great city. I love it. I've been living there for a long time.
Right. Where is it?
It's in the South Bay, close to LAX Airport.
Right, very close.
Yes.
Very, very close. And it's a city that has seen a lot of greatness throughout the years. Isn't the Great Western Forum in the city of Englewood?
Yes, it is.
And it's next to Westchester,
yes.
So it's faced some challenges, which we'll talk about in a little while. Tell us about the office of city clerk.
Well, I've been elected now for 10 years.
Wow.
And my responsibilities are to conduct elections, and it's a hybrid position.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also department head. And so there's two sides of it. We house all the records in the city clerk's office. We do contracts.
And this is not a small city. I mean,
No.
How many people live in the city?
About 140,000.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good mid-sized city, to say the least.
Yes, and so we, I sit on permits and license.
Right.
And we
administer elections.
Yes.
Which is what's coming up soon.
Yes.
And there are two measures on the ballot that I think are worthy of discussion, regardless of whether you live in Englewood, because it really talks about good government and what is good government, what is transparent government, and what is efficient government. And so I thought we'd talk about them as an example of what municipalities are doing to try to modernize and move into the 21st century. Let's focus first on what we know as Measure P.
Okay.
Tell me what the law is today with regard to the publication of ordinances.
Okay, well, we're a chartered city.
Which means?
Which means we have to follow the rules of how this charter came about.
Exactly.
And
it's not a contract city, as an example.
No.
You have your own constitution, essentially.
Right. And so the charter says that we have to publish every ordinance that comes before the council and that is approved by the city council.
Okay.
And so
publish. That's the key
in the
phrase.
Newspaper.
In the newspaper.
Correct.
It can't be published on the front door of City Hall.
Well, it only could be published on the front door if we didn't have a newspaper that was adjudicated to the city of Englewood, but we do have.
You do. Interesting.
So with that, we have to publish. And ordinances run anywhere from 1 page to 20 some odd pages, depending on
and how
the
often
topic.
do you have ordinances passing?
Well, quite a few.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, we have quite a few.
Right.
But one that we have that is a given every year is our salary ordinance.
Okay.
And that is approximately about 12 pages.
Right.
And that cost about $6,000.
$6,000.
And that's a deal, actually.
That's such a deal.
Yes.
And the budget of the city clerk's office?
$12,000.
Oh my. So you could go broke just on publication.
Yes.
And so when we think about the fact we're in the 21st century, and God bless our print partners, we don't want to take away from the great work that our print publications are doing.
Yes.
We do have tight budgets.
Yes.
And so Measure P addresses this very issue. What would Measure P do?
Well, it would allow for me to publish a summary of the ordinance and house the document in our office, which we do that anyway.
Right.
I mean, and you can get it online as well.
Right.
And so that would be a plus. It would be really helpful if the voters would vote yes on Measure P.
So do you have a sense as to what folks are saying about this? Because on the one hand, I could see folks saying, this makes sense, saves money. On the other end, I could see folks saying, decreases transparency.
Yeah. Yes, when it was brought before the City Council, because they did approve for this to be placed on the ballot, there were people in the chambers that had asked, they wanted to see us continue to have it in the paper. However, they don't really understand the necessity of saving money. And I think they do understand, but they want the best of both worlds.
I understand. And so again, it would be on the website.
Correct.
You could come to your office and get a copy.
Yes.
And you will still publish a summary.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll see what happens there. Then there's the issue of Measure W. One day, you and your deputy, a couple of years ago?
About last year.
Last year. Tell us what happened on that day.
Well, we had a salary ordinance which comes before the City Council every year for approval. And if one City Council member decides that they want you to read this ordinance, then you have to read it. It could be anywhere from 1 page to 36 pages.
And in this instance, it was a salary ordinance.
Salary ordinance.
One council member said, I do not want to waive the reading.
Right.
And so how long were you and your deputy reading the ordinance?
Over an hour.
Over
an hour and a half, because it's a fee schedule attached and it all numbers, and it's for each individual job. And so it starts from an assistant to a clerk to an executive to, I mean, literally every job in the city.
And how many members are on the board of, are on the City Council?
5.
5. And so one member says read it, and there goes Yvonne Horton and her deputy for an hour and a half.
Right.
Reading salaries.
Right.
So Measure W would change that. What would Measure W do?
Well, it would allow for the majority of the council to be able to make that final decision, which is really totally fair. If you have, we have 5 members, 4 council members and 1 mayor.
Sure.
And
directly elected?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And it would allow for the majority of them to say, okay, yes, we want you to read it, or no, we don't want you to read it.
What are your voters saying about this?
I think that they want to see us save time. I think their main issue is taking care of the city business. And saving time and money is a good thing, and I think they would love it.
I want to talk, if I may, about the Englewood School Board.
Okay.
I know you are not a member of the school board. I know that you are elected as a city clerk. But the fact of the matter is the Englewood School Board has been in the news over the last year. It was about to go bankrupt, and Senator Rod Wright ran a bill which had the state take over the school board and bail out the school board with about $55 million. That's the background. At this upcoming election, there should be, in a normal election cycle, 3 seats up on the school board. You are running the elections. In this upcoming election, will there be a vote for school board?
Yes,
Why?
for 3 seats.
Why?
Well, the state wanted us to still continue to have an election because they wanted to be, when they were ready and willing to turn it back over to the school board, they wanted to have members in place. And so because of that, we have to still continue to have an election.
So are there school board meetings?
That I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
that I'm not sure.
Which is fair. I mean,
yes.
So what will happen to these people who are elected in the upcoming election?
You know, I don't really know what will happen to them.
That's
honestly,
fair.
But I know that they are running the school board seat.
Is there more? Do they run at large?
Yes, and actually they run out at large and a little parts out of Englewood into LA area.
Of course, of course.
Yes.
So is there more than 3 people running?
Yes, they're in seat 1 is 1 person running. It's an incumbent.
Okay.
But 2 and 3 both have 2.
So there are multiple people running for an office that won't exist for. I mean, do we have a sense as to when the state will cede control back to the Englewood School District?
I don't.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone does. I don't think you're unique. It's really a mystery.
Right.
Off year election, off cycle election, how do you get your voters out?
I actually at the city council meetings, I remind people to get out to vote.
Right.
We have early voting. It started March 4th. I'm constantly telling them, I send out information regarding the election.
And you're not on the ballot this time around?
No, not this time.
Her name is Yvonne Horton. She is the city clerk for Englewood. My name is Brad Pomerantz. This is California Edition.
Thank you.